Hello survivors and welcome to another Walking Dead Road to Survival video, and in this video we're going to be doing another podcast edition. This one's going to be surrounding allegiances and more information that we've been receiving based on the future of allegiances and things that actually already currently happen, be it allegiance weapons and content. And in this video I'm going to be joined again by Man on the Moon and Texx.
Good to be back. Good to be
Good to
back,
be
man.
back. What's up, guys?
So first off, we're going to be talking about what we saw in the podcast again. And one of the things they touched on was older allegiances being expanded and effectively getting more characters. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on this, like bringing back the potential of actually being able to use these allegiances as teams, potentially. Like we've seen current teams right now that have been built as allegiance teams, which I think is really good. Like we saw with Typhoon, we saw with NWO, and we're seeing with the Telltale, where it seems to be being built as a team, whereas the older allegiances, that wasn't much the case. Do you think this is good? Do you think this is going to potentially be fun to bring back some of those old characters and actually build them out as actual teams? I'll hit up Moon first with this one.
I like it. And actually, I'm honestly kind of I'm happy about it because I feel like the reason the old, at the beginning of the Mythic era, the reason allegiances didn't really fit well with one another was because, well, they didn't want to make any one thing too OP, and they just had to spread stuff out at launch, So, okay, well, this is a good character. We got Princess from Commonwealth, we've got Andrea from Atlanta, so on and so forth, and they would just sprinkle a good character here and there, and you couldn't make a team. And I'm glad, in my mind, the general progression was to eventually make it to where you could do that. And I'm glad they're going that route, personally.
How about yourself, Tex? What are your thoughts on just older allegiances effectively getting more members?
I actually think that's a good idea, and building, some team synergy within the allegiance. I know that they tried to kind of have like a crit idea early on with the survivors, right? And you had a couple of tunes where crit played into that. So you had Michonne, and then later came 6th anniversary edition Rosita, and with Ico and stuff like that. So you kind of had some type of synergy that I could see was trying to be built there. But the later teams, one I think we didn't speak of yet is the Kingdom. That you can actually build a decent defensive team with Kingdom characters. You know what I mean? With Zeke and William and Marcus and Cliff. You know what I mean? You can build kind of like a staged defense there. I think that them doing the allegiances this way is absolutely good, and I can't wait to see what else they're getting ready to do with the Telltale one that's currently in the game.
Because some of the older ones were a little disappointing, especially when they seemed to try and move into the allegiance-based teams. I mainly remember Skybound X being that potential attack team that just really didn't work together. There were like maybe 2 or 3 of those characters that were good, and then obviously certain characters came out, so Andrea 2000 wasn't as good. But I think if they eventually add more characters to that, do you think there's potential they could switch characters' allegiances? Because we do have characters that are in strange allegiances that didn't exist once upon a time. For instance, like Ivan Nova. This is one I bring up on my stream all the time, that she's in Rebels, where if they just switched her over to Holiday Heroes, she could get all the bonuses that those Holiday Heroes characters give, like where Holiday's Heroes get a 60% attack buff with Carl's passive, or they get the boost from Davy's passive as well. And then you've got Eva right now, who's a Holiday Hero. Those 2 characters could work together in the same team and get quite a big boost. So would you like to see some of that happen? Because I think even there's another character, who is it? Uncle Sam kind of feels out of place in the Hilltop.
Yeah, I think personally, oh man, Ivanova is a holiday hero with how they would synergize right now.
That would actually be a good team. That would actually be a good
she
team.
She would be slapping Headless Herschel.
So are you saying
Ivanova?
she'd be slaptastical?
Yeah, she'll be slaptastical. Oh man, I think that is a good change. She would be very good in the Holiday Heroes, man.
What about you, Moon? What are your thoughts? Like, I know some of these characters might be like out of the mix, but it could bring them back in, right?
Yeah, they definitely could. I think one thing that gets me, and it gets me a bit because it actually affected me personally, still have actually, because I still haven't maxed them out, is you mentioned 6th anniversary Rosita being a survivor. If you max her, you don't get no Morgan shards. And so if they were to expand upon allegiances like that, I would hope that any characters that were in the allegiance would count towards the mythic trial, regardless of if they were one of the original characters needed. Just because they're still they are there, you know, they are a member of that allegiance, and I don't see a reason why you wouldn't let the more free to play people catch up later on. I mean, if it takes there being 7 or 8 characters in an allegiance for somebody to get a mythic trial tune to LB3, that's going to take them a heck of a lot longer than it would for the people that are paying for it. So
Yep.
that would be my thought on that personally.
Yep, I agree, and I think this is probably a topic for another video because how we even get mythic trial characters is changed multiple times, and I think we need like a sustained way going forward. And I think all the other ones need to be changed into the new system as well. So they need to come out with one way of doing things and then make sure it's the same way for every single allegiance. That's like I said, a topic for another video. What about allegiance weapons potential? We have had pretty much, I think, just a singular allegiance weapon. Initially, when this came out, I was honestly kind of negative about it, but it was also because the characters we had in the game at the time, how viable it was, the game modes we had was very like limited. But since we've had like challenge run, and since we've had more conquest and stuff like that happen, I've seen the viability. I can't remember if Alpha Savage Dirty Machete was that released when Lydia was released, or was that released before? I think that was released when Rosita was released, which was 6th anniversary. So Lydia wasn't around at the time, I don't think. So obviously,
No,
more characters coming out of that allegiance makes it a bit more viable. But what are your thoughts on like allegiance weapons? Just straight up, do you think they're good? Do you think they're fun, or do you think they're more too constricting? Any thoughts on that, Texx?
this came out with Lydia. It was one of the uh I think like bonus missions or something like that where you can actually get the allegiance weapon. Um and that's when her and Skins first came out and stuff like that. So the weapon was out with Lydia. But the thing is that um there there was no setup that you could properly use it in besides with Lydia and Skins at the time. And people wasn't really getting Skins, so it was only Lydia, so it didn't have a place. But if you bring out more Whisperers, right, on the offensive end, if you bring them back out and put them into the mix, there's a way that you could be able to work this in, because all Whisperers receive 60 plus crit and 15% AP at the beginning of each wave. So this could definitely work. And then heal reduction when dealing a critical, 50% heal reduction for one turn. I think that this could definitely work out. So yeah, I mean, this could work out with in a couple of different scenarios that I'm thinking of with Mike on the team as well too, like in Alpha, when she gives infection too. So I think it could really, really work.
Lydia's just, or not Lydia, Alpha's a weird one, just in my mind, like in my head, just because of the fact that like you do her rush, you target somebody, and one random other character that's not the target gets the infection. I'm just like, how do I? It always just makes me like, how do I plan this?
Yeah, not such a straightforward character, but what about the weapon when it comes to like allegiance weapons? What are your thoughts on there being allegiance weapons? How about you, Moon?
Oh, I think it's a great idea. I think that's actually something that could very well just buff out some of these allegiances in general.
So it could be like the
I
missing link that an allegiance has. For instance, like you could bring like a Typhoon team's already out. It already has quite a lot of what's going on with that allegiance. But if you brought out a Typhoon fast weapon that Wang Fa could hold, it could be like a nice little boost for that team as well.
right. No, yeah, absolutely. And I've thought a lot of crazy ideas of weapons over the years, so they could definitely work with it. It all just depends on what they want to do. And I mean, is it going to be on bound character, is it going to be a bound weapon? Is it going to be a free roaming weapon? I would think that if it was an allegiance weapon, you would probably want it free roaming, and you would just have it be, obviously trait specific. So you can only use that trait on it. That way it's usable in the future. Otherwise, what's the point?
That's basically what I was going to touch on next. Basically, whether you mind having attached weapons that have allegiance bonuses. I know a lot of the time you can look at weapons on characters and go, well, that's not very good. I'm just going to switch out and go on to a weapon that I've already got built. But if characters came out with more allegiance-based stuff base and they were 5-star weapons straight away, then at least when you swap them out, you could go for weapons that you've already got based on the team you've got. But then if you put all the allegiance together, they could all have like a nice little boost because of the allegiance weapons. So I don't necessarily think it's a terrible idea, but we have only had one allegiance weapon so far, right? We have only had the Alpha's Savage Dirty Machete. Oh no, we did actually have one other one. We had Titan's weapon, right? If Titan gets a takedown, all NWO characters get 50% attack.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. Stun on attack when attacking a target, 50% chance to stun. And then when killing a target, all New World Order teammates get 50% attack for 2 turns. It's actually a good weapon because they're attack-based squad too.
So like weapons like that aren't necessarily a negative either. I guess it always just comes down to the allegiance, the character they're going to be used on, the characters that potentially, like I think initially a lot of the negativity was around the characters that existed right now. But if characters are if these allegiances are going to be expanded and more characters are going to come in, the potential of these weapons is just going to be better within that small group of characters, right? It should be just more fun that way.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot fun. I think it will be. There's different, like you said, there's different combinations you can be able to go with too, right? So, you could build out different weapon sets for different allegiances, and then if they're expanding the allegiance, then you would take somebody in or take a team in based off of that allegiance and everything. So I think that is actually pretty good.
And I can only imagine from a character design perspective, if a weapon exists and it can only be used in a very small group, it's probably easier to design for that specific group than it is like the entire game and how powerful that could be in the entire game. So you could effectively get a bit more powerful weapons that way. Like the Whisperer weapon is powerful, but it does only affect like 4 or 5 characters right now, so it isn't really affecting a great deal of the characters that exist. So I don't think it's going to be too crazy.
It also just depends on the effect, though. I mean,
yep, for sure.
That weapon's not necessarily all that crazy, but that's, just it's AP. AP's nice and it's fun, but it's not that crazy.
Okay, so the last thing I want to touch on is potential eventual allegiance-based content. We don't have much of that in RTS. We have kind of had some allegiance-restricted roadmaps in the past, which I didn't actually think was that bad when it was the combo ones, where it's like you can only take young survivors and Hilltop. I think that was the one time they did it. Other than that, they did like Mythic Trial roadmaps, which were very restricted. But we could potentially have things that come out in the future that are allegiance-based, like we have in other games. I play some other games. For instance, Marvel Strike Force. In Marvel Strike Force, you can only use certain allegiances on like the top level content. When you're doing faction versus environment, basically as a faction, it's like PvE, but as a faction, and it does have allegiance kind of limitations. I think initially when the allegiances came into RTS, basically exactly what Moon said, where they couldn't do that because it would be way too limiting. But we're a year into Mythics now, so I think things are going to kind of slightly open up, especially if they're adding more characters to the older allegiances. Could this be something that is kind of fun? It makes you upgrade older characters. It makes you use different teams. It, makes a bit more gameplay variance rather than using the same teams every single attack. What are your thoughts on that, Texx?
I think that's actually good. There's a mode in Marvel Strike Force where you get to you can only use certain characters in like ISO 5 or ISO 6 or something like that. I believe it's called, where it's like you can only use the web slinger heroes in here, right? So it forces you to kind of work on that team and build that team up so you can be able to receive those rewards from that particular game mode. So I think that is something that is very, very good and something that's really small and could be implemented to add variety into the game.
Yeah, and it would reward people who have already worked on these teams already, right? So someone who's already put a lot of resources into Atlanta would already have a decent team to run Atlanta-based content in the future, right? Now, new characters could come out and boost that team even more, but it feels like almost feels like you getting usage of things you've already put a lot of resources into, which just feels good, right? It's a feel-good feeling now. What about yourself, Moon, when it comes to like allegiance-based content? Would you want to have like Whisperer story roadmaps and stuff where you could only do Whisperers, or like Whisperer content, or like a completely different game mode? Does this open like really good avenues for you in your mind, or what are your thoughts on just allegiance-based combat in general?
Well, in general, I think it's just, I mean, it's there, so why wouldn't you use it? In my mind, I actually had just now, I surprisingly enough, they could do something, as far as what characters to use, they could do something to the effect of, for as far as the intellectual property of The Walking Dead is concerned, everyone has beef with somebody else, right? So you've got the Whisperers that now you can only take up. Who was it that the Whisperers attacked? Was Hilltop or Commonwealth or whatever it was?
It was Hilltop. It was Hilltop.
It was Hilltop. Okay, so you can only bring Hilltop characters against the Whisperers because of
That's actually a really cool idea. Just
Yeah.
like a legendary battle sort of thing.
yeah,
Like
and,
reliving a legendary battle from the storyline. There was
Saviors versus Atlanta.
that's actually
know?
just cool in itself. That'd be a really
Yeah.
cool game mode, I think.
Yeah, so I think that and that is literally allegiance based content. So
Yep.
and I literally just thought of that as you were explaining that. I was like, what would be really cool? That would actually, and it follows, as far as just, intellectual property and canon and stuff goes. I've always been a canon guy when it comes to my nerd stuff. So that just sounds fun to me.
Yeah, that sounds good. I used to play a game a long time ago, and I haven't played it for a while. It was called Total War, and there was they have different editions, and the one I played is called Shogun Total War. I don't. It's based on like Japanese shogunate and the battles they used to have. Basically, it was all split up. You had to unite the clans basically, but they used to have a game mode in that where you could kind of like relive a legendary battle, and you had to like defend with like a legendary like 400 troops, because this was the legend. They defended with 400 troops against like 4,000. Very hard to do, but that you could like in this, like you said, a story mode. We've got the whole canon there. There is the beef between two factions or allegiances. Why not create that battle mode potential? It would be PvE, but it could be kind of cool. I like that idea.
And everyone, I mean, like literally every group in Walking Dead at some point has beef with somebody else. So like
Yep.
you've already got the built-in, well, who goes against who?
Endless potential. So I think that's a pretty good time to wrap up this podcast episode. I want to thank both Man on the Moon and Texx for joining me on this one.
Yeah, of course, man. It's been great to be here. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, man. Thanks for the vibes. As always, it's pretty good, man. Appreciate it.
It's always good. Now, guys, viewing this video, if you have any thoughts on allegiances, the future of allegiances, or any ideas, please leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Stay tuned for more podcast episodes. You can check out the past ones in links on your screen right now. But that is the end of this video. I want to thank you very much for tuning in. And as always, keep on surviving, guys. Keep on surviving.